Hey everyone, thanks for joining for another practice along lesson this morning. This is another cool conceptual practice along. There's been some people asking me over the past little while about riffs and runs and scales that you can kind of use and to make these kind of flashy piano patterns. And it's definitely, like when I was first starting out as a player, I was really attracted to all of these crazy, piano players that could do these massive solos and doing just sweet, arpeggios and runs that go all across the keyboard. It was just so fun to listen to. And then as I started to get more and more into, exploring that style of playing, it was so fun to play because it takes you away from this mentality of being locked in just a couple octaves, and now all of a sudden you have the whole, range of the instrument just as your playground. So I'm going to show you my mentality for making some of the piano runs that I tend to do in my own music. I will preface all this with a small word of caution here. That this stuff, I definitely recommend, it's so easy to get into this mentality of running before you're walking when you start to do all this sort of stuff. So don't, practice this stuff to your heart's content, but don't do it at the expense of your technique practice, because that's really important too. So let's just kind of look at what we had, what I'd played at the beginning of this lesson here. I was working in the key of C minor. And as you can kind of hear, as I'm just kind of noodling around here, those chords sound really open. They sound kind of spacey and icy almost. And the reason why is because they don't have any, there's no thirds in them. And remember, in music theory, the third interval is kind of the one that gives you the color of the chord. So that, if you look at it in the simplest of terms, you can look at your major chord, sounds nice and bright and happy, and then you look at your minor chord and that sounds a little bit more dark and moody, and all that I'm changing is the third. But this here, this shape, this is a suspended fourth chord, which means I'm playing C, F, and G. Just put the octave on top there. That sounds kind of ambiguous. There's not a lot of information there as far as an emotion other than this kind of like suspenseful thing. So I could go, and then there it's happy, or I can go, and then it's kind of dark and moody and sad. So at the beginning of this lesson, I was playing around with these suspended chords with their high octaves, and I was playing with basically three different chords in the bass here. I was playing with my C, my F, and then my G, and then. So if you look at what, just take a look at my hands here. I'm playing a C and a G, just an open fifth in the bass, and then I'm playing C, F, G, and high C. And one of the first things that's important to start building as far as muscle memory and strength, if you do want to start doing these runs, is motions like this. Because obviously a big piano run is built basically on two things, in my opinion. It's built on your hand motion sort of within the span that you're at, but then you also have transitional movements to get you to other parts of the keyboard. So the first thing the kind of bedrock that kind of comes first is this hand motion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the metronome. Let's see here. I'm going to set up my metronome so that we can kind of develop some sense of timing with these loops, and we're going to play these suspended arpeggios. And we're going to move from that C, and then we're going to take this shape up 1/4. So I'm going to play now F. So again, this is just a suspended 4th chord. I'm playing F, B flat, C, and then F up high. And then I'm going to go to my 5th, which is going to be a G minor. Again, suspended 4th, G, C, D, G up high. And then, so we're going to start nice and low here. And then we're going to just kind of work our way up, really nice and slow. So let's pick a good tempo to kind of do that at. Okay. Slow it down a little bit. Let's go to 70 BPM. All right, so we're going to start at 70. If this is a little too fast, let me know. We can slow it down even further. But basically, we're making 16th notes out of this. So we're hitting our bottom note on every beat. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're just going to let our left hands ring out. Now we're going to go to F. Now we're going to go to G. Now we're going to go up to C. Now up to F. Now up to G. Now up to C. F. G. Okay. So, yeah, there's a couple ways to make that motion as efficiently or as efficient as possible. Your thumb note is always your anchor. This might get a little, maybe this might sound a little cosmic or whatever, but I like to think of my thumb. All of the energy from the rest of my fingers comes from my thumb. So it's just this kind of. It's this kind of drumming motion, all based on this sort of a forearm wrist kind of flick. I don't know if you can see that in any way that makes sense, but that's something to just to kind of keep in mind mentally that your thumb is sort of where your power comes from. It'll also help keep your arms and hands from getting tired. If you're kind of basing things off of your thumb, because that tends to be the most powerful digit on your hand, I guess you'd call it. Yeah, so So the fortunate thing about sort of playing a little riff like this is we're using the same sets of fingers with each shape here. We're using our 1, 2, 3, and 5. And it's all sort of set up in an octave, so you can almost take this hand shape and it almost doesn't really matter where you're placing your hand on the keyboard. You're going to be playing that kind of suspended 4th octave shape, just sort of regardless, especially if you keep it in the key of C minor. But you know, you can take it in D. All right, so with that in mind, let's slow it down even further. We're going to slow it down to 60, and this time when you're practicing, really think about that thumb and think about kind of anchoring that thumb and using that as your both your sort of place of power when you're making this riff, but also it's your launch point rhythmically. Notice how when I play, I try to make sure my thumb is landing on every beat. So if I can get my thumb landing on every beat, then the rest of the fingers, eventually tend to follow suit. So if you're just starting out and you kind of are maybe having troubles with the timing of this and spacing out your notes in between the beats, you could even just go back to the most simple of exercises and just make sure you're getting your thumb hitting every note. Taylor, is it possible to get just a little bit more metronome? Yeah, just hear how okay, now we're going to go to F. Now we're going to go to G. G. Back to C. Okay, so even though it seems like doing a big riff like that, that I just sort of closed that off, seems like a big step ahead from the exercise we were just playing. It's really it really all comes down to having an awareness of the speed in which to basically move your hands underneath or over top of the shape on the keyboard. So notice how each time I'm switching chord positions, I'm going from bottom to top. And my change note is the 4th. So here, look at this G here. Okay, so So my finger 2 is landing on the on the 4 of the next chord. So yeah, hopefully that makes some sense to anyone out there. Let's move on to another style of kind of a riff that I like to do. And this is built on minor thirds. So I'm going to stay in C minor, and I'm going to teach you how to do this. Super dramatic sounding. But also, other than the fact that you know, I'm playing it fast, it's pretty simple. Only requires the use of 3 fingers. So if you're you know, Tyrannosaurus Rex or something out there, this is the riff for you. So we have a C minor third shape here, built on 3 notes: C, D, and E flat. And as I'm traversing down the piano, I'm going from this C minor third thing to a G minor third. So C minor third, G minor third. But I'm kind of doing this little, there's like doo-doo-doo-doo. Oops. So the finger motions for that are 2, 3, 2, 1, 2. And in this case, I'm using my finger 2 as my kind of push note, or my anchor note, or whatever you kind of want to call it. So notice how my finger 2 is how I transition from the C minor third to the G minor third. Okay, so it's almost like a scale motion style technique here, but it's, instead of doing like a full 8-note phrase, I'm just doing this kind of 3-note jump and popping down the piano. And the beautiful thing about this sort of riff that makes it deceptively easy to grasp is the fact that if you close your eyes, the 2 minor thirds, they feel identical. So there's sort of 2 ways to, there's 2 ways that I find useful to improvise on the piano in just sort of an intuitive way. One of those ways is to improvise by looking at the visual shape of the keyboard and recognizing where you see your patterns repeating in your octave kind of ranges, and then kind of building out through that. But then the other way that is really useful to think about when you're doing some improvisation is just the physical feel of the piano. So for a riff like this, don't even think about any other notes except for C, D, E flat, and G, A, B flat. And if you want to simplify it even further, don't think about anything else other than this sort of just like physical shape, how it feels on your hands. So this kind of, you have a whole tone of the 2 white keys, and then you have a semitone jump between the middle note and your top note. And there's the 3 points in the piano where this shape feels identical. There's the jump from C to E flat, jump from G to B flat, and then just one neighboring step down, the jump from F to A flat. And that's why if you're sort of relatively familiar with the key of C minor is actually a great key to build riffs like this on, because of those familiar shapes and how they land on the 1, the 4, and the 5. Okay. But we're just going to keep this to the 1-5 thing because that's a cool way to end a song. Say you're playing just something kind of pretty. And then you want to, I don't know. Oops. So let's take the metronome down to, let's see what this sounds like at 60. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to go one more time, starting on C. So remember, we're always starting on that middle note. We're on our C shape. So C shape, G, C, G, C, G, G. 2, 3, repeat. So that's the pattern. Once you get familiar with that, we're going to bump it up 10 BPM and do it again. Make things a little flashier, you can use your pinky note to play the fifths. So more of a hand motion than just strictly a finger motion, or more of an arm motion rather, because notice how I'm kind of, you kind of got to hammer down a little bit. But don't, rush into that. That's something to do once you're comfortable. We're going to bump up to 80 BPM now and play this same riff. 1, 2, 3, 4. 90. Now we're starting to get into like the blazing run territory. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. All right. Let's try 100. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. bump it up to 120. And the reason why I'm going to do that, let's see, this is... Yeah, actually, you know what? Let's bump it up to 130. This will probably seem really fast. But the reason why I want to demo this at 130 is because I find once you get to a certain speed at the piano, my mentality for kind of keeping time and tempo starts to shift just a little bit. When you're at those slower speeds, you have more time to sort of reset your hands. You almost have time to kind of camp out a little while, so you can kind of go, you know, hanging out in C, then you're hanging out in G, and you kind of get some, you can kind of like move in sort of installments. But when you're playing really fast, and when you kind of want to get into this flowy style of piano, you don't have time to really pause. You're always just sort of passing through. It's just this kind of... It's this continual motion. And if you have the muscle memory right, and if you have the kind of internal arm distance pattern kind of just locked into your head, you start to get to this point where you can just kind of do this motion, and you don't even need to be... You don't need to be doing it necessarily on the keyboard. You just sort of, you know, for lack of a more elegant term, you just wiggle your hands kind of in like time and distance with the piano, and you're sort of building that memory. So let's try this at 130, and let's just see how it flows. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. That's the other thing that we could explore here is, I'll just touch on this briefly because it's another kind of, maybe another lesson. Once you get comfortable with these runs and moving around the piano at greater distances than just kind of within 1 or 2 octaves, you can start to explore what that sounds like with your left hand as well. The exercises we were doing just now, I'm just kind of letting the bass be the kind of finish line in the left hand, right? But if you get more comfortable, you can start to use your left hand as another harmonic sort of element. So this is, I'm still sort of keeping things fairly simple in theory here, but you know, the arm movements might be a little tricky. So I'm just moving from my open fifths, just going down the piano, in line with my hand positions. So. So if you want to practice that, I'll just go over that really, really briefly. We're going to go back down to, let's go back down to 80, see what that sounds like. So I'm going to start out high here. Okay, so all I'm doing is just start up a little higher. And if you want to, you could even maybe incorporate that riff that we did at the beginning there. So like a... going from low to high. Yeah, so once you start practicing this stuff, you'll start to notice how familiar these kinds of techniques feel to just your chord inversions and simple exercises like that, because you know, the truth is you can do a lot of cool riffs by just repeating a motion going up or down an octave, or going up and down multiple octaves, and it sort of becomes this repetitive pattern. So let's, I'm just going to see if we got any questions or comments or concerns. No, nothing from anybody. So that'll be it for this lesson then. If there is questions or something that you want to ask me after the fact, let me know. If you have any other, you know, like licks or something that you hear that you want me to kind of analyze or break down, let me know that too. And in a future lesson, we're going to look at kind of what the left hand can do a little bit more with this style of playing. But for now, just sort of practice these those basically two patterns, and you can practice them how I did. That's a great starting point. But you know, kind of see if there's other ways that maybe they're inspiring to you to make your own kind of patterns and motions. So yeah, I hope you have fun with them. Thanks so much. I'm going to just do a little playing out here.